Hey there everyone, and welcome to the final video on the tank dragons for this dragon review series. So in this video we're going to look at Enflare, Reinhorn and Banefire. Now first of all we're going to look at their requirements, what they take to get and to level up. So Enflare first. This takes quite a considerable amount of dragon claws and silver. This is actually one of the more, oh no, don't listen to me there, I was going to say it's a more premium dragon. But yeah, it takes a lot to get in terms of claws and silver, and then also the fish it needs are 5.4 times experience. It takes a lot to level up. This is not a cheap dragon at all. It's going to be a tough one to get to max. The next one is Reinhorn, which is right down here, and again takes a lot of fish. Sorry, a lot of claws, a lot of silver, and fish-wise 4.5 times. So not quite as much as Enflare, but pretty much there. It takes a lot to get. And then finally, we've got Banefire, which is right up at the top. And this, again, very similar. A lot of claws, 36 million silver, and this is 5.4 times. So none of these dragons are cheap at all. The late dragons are pretty much all expensive dragons to get, and these are no exceptions. They take a lot. So bear that in mind if you're going to go for these. Firstly, we have Enflare to look at. Now this is a really interesting one, and the skill descriptions are not clear. So the first skill is this charge that it just did. It's a 10-second cooldown. It charges through the enemies, knocking them down and dealing 0.5 times basic damage. It then does a big air effect on the target it actually charged to, which is that blast at the end, which deals 2 times basic attack damage. Now, this damage is not very high at all. Because it's a tank dragon, 2 times basic damage, that's not going to really do anything. So, not a whole lot of point training this skill. However, there's the interesting note, which I found when testing this originally, and I'll probably bring a screenshot up here on screen so you can see. Occasionally, if this attacks a group of enemies and it charges through them, it seems to kind of get caught on them, and it will hit them many, many times with the charged damage. I couldn't count the numbers on this because it was a ridiculous amount, but maybe this is reproducible and will be something that you can rely on when there's a group of enemies. I don't know, but maybe sometimes it will do more damage. Either way, normally it does not very much damage. The second skill is the really interesting one. It's actually quite simple, but the skill description is incorrect. So my one, I believe, is correct in that after Enflare takes 10 hits, it then gains a permanent buff of 60% damage reduction. Now, it's really hard to say this for sure. I looked at the numbers, I saw when it happened, and you see it's a kind of like effect that goes on it. This fiery effect coming in from below. Now, the skill doesn't have any cooldown on it or anything like that. And if you look at the damage numbers of what it takes, it's as if it has 60% damage reduction permanently after it happens. It makes Enflare incredibly good at tanking and basically the best. I mean, I'll get to that later, but it's really, really good for tanking. If you use cupcakes, it's just going to stay alive forever. And what's nice also is that because it's doing this charging around and knocking enemies down, that helps a little bit too, keeping it alive. So it's gonna disrupt all these melee enemies that try to come in and fight with it. So yeah, that's cool. And that's basically how it works. It's simple enough. It just basically gets in the way and then tanks like mad, and you keep it alive with cupcakes. So if you need a tank dragon and you want it to really just sit there and be in the way, this is the best one for it. The next dragon to look at is Reinhorn. Now this used to be a support dragon, and it very much still is a support dragon. It attacks from range rather than close range, as you can see here, and it doesn't really get in the way. It doesn't have any damage reduction stuff or healing for itself. It just gives buffs and has that first skill. So the first skill sends out reindeer. It's a 10-second cooldown, and they go in all directions. Anything they hit, they do 2 times basic damage to, and they stun them. So you can see the stun immune effect there. It's fine, but nothing that special. It's not really going to do any damage. It didn't really when it was a support dragon, and now it definitely doesn't because it's a tank dragon. So that's what we have here. I think actually also I messed up with the rate it attacks. It's 2 seconds. Anyway, the second skill creates a present on the ground, and it creates a random effect. Now, I'm not letting this dragon tank because it's not really going to tank very well. This second skill, it gives party buffs, but the buffs don't affect Reinhorn. So they also vary randomly based on training. So like some of them benefit lots, other ones don't benefit that much. So the party buff of damage gives 25% damage once it's trained up. That changes massively by the training. The move speed buff is 12% at max, which is, to be honest, barely anything. And then the heal over time effect, I didn't actually write down the numbers on it. I didn't bother to test it because, to be honest, this dragon's rubbish. It's so bad. And having random buffs means you can't rely on any of those. The best one is the damage buff, 25% damage. But it's going to be so unreliable that you just can't tell. And the buff only lasts for 5 seconds as well. So it's not even like you can really capitalize on it very much. The slowing the enemies is another effect that it will do. I'm not sure how much it slows by. It's probably like a 50% slow or something. And yeah, that's basically this dragon. So it does a little bit of damage and stunning. It does some random effects. Tells you what the effect is, which is kind of nice. So you don't have to work it out or kind of pay attention to it or anything like that. Now this dragon, I would say, it is better by being a tank dragon. Originally, when it's a support dragon, it had double the damage, but it doesn't really deal damage, so that was kind of useless. And as a tank dragon, it gets double the health, so it's going to survive a bit better than it did before. But that doesn't make it a good dragon. I don't know why. Just sadly, they should have given this like 3 or 4 skills and had a bit more on it. As it is, it doesn't do enough, and that's how it goes. The last dragon is luckily far more interesting. Banefire is a really good dragon. I love its design. I think it's an excellent dragon to finish on. So Banefire is not for PvE. It's not really the best in terms of tanking, but it's a brilliant PvP dragon. The first skill you see here has this fiery, like sort of flame armor effect around it, plus also a red ball around it. It's quite misleading because that fire doesn't do any damage, as you can see on this crystal. All that really does is redirects damage from you to Banefire. Now, the skill description that it's written, it talks about it being a shield and that kind of stuff. That's not really true. Banefire doesn't get any shield. It doesn't get any extra health or anything like that. All it does is literally redirects the damage from you to Banefire, and it's just capped at how much it will redirect. So while that aura is going on, and I should say now, there's a 10-second cooldown, and the aura goes for 10 seconds, so it's active most of the time, but not all the time. Actually, I should say 10 seconds. It doesn't look like it's lasting 10 seconds. I will double check that and write in the description if I'm wrong. But anyway, during that time, you take half damage, and the other half of the damage gets redirected to Banefire. So no matter where Banefire is in the map, you're going to be taking half of the damage, and Banefire will be taking half of it. Now, if Banefire takes more than 30% of its health this way, then it stops taking damage from you. So if you just, run in there and you take tons and tons of damage, Banefire won't just keep taking all the damage for you, or half the damage for you. It's also not a 50% damage reduction, so it doesn't stack with other damage reductions. It's literally half of the damage you would take is instead taken by Banefire. So that's how that first skill works. I hope that's clear enough. And you can probably guess that's really, really good in PvP. The second skill is when you're getting hit. So when you take damage, there is a chance of Banefire teleporting to your location, and when it appears there, it does 2 times basic attack damage to everything around, which doesn't matter. It's a tank dragon. It doesn't really do damage. The important thing is it stuns everything in a massive area where it lands. So just imagine this in PvP, right? Where you're running around, Banefire sees someone, so it goes, oh, let's buff up, let's put this shield thing on, and then you're going to be taking half damage when you get hit. For, most of the time, you'll be taking half damage, and then also, as you're getting hit, Banefire is just going to teleport to you and stun any enemies around you. So you're just getting these extra random stuns on the enemies, plus also taking half the damage a lot of the time. Now, if they do loads of damage to you, so Banefire's health, goes down lots, then it's not going to redirect all the damage. But it really, really helps you tank in a way that works in PvP. Because most of the tank dragons in PvP, they just kind of do their own thing, and a person just ignores it. Enemies will attack the thing closest to it, but people will not. They'll attack you instead. But Banefire doesn't care about that. It's going to, help protect you even when it's not there in the way. So Banefire is really a PvP dragon more than anything else. I love it for PvP. I have my Banefire relic. I would love to have it in Mythic and actually properly test it out, because I think it will be amazingly good. But PvE, I don't think it's that good, other than maybe for knights or something, you know, where you're actually planning to get hit, because wizards and archers, they tend to want to be out the way. Wizards, I guess you can go in and tank, you know. It is actually, to be honest, how I choose to play, so maybe it would help me out there. But most of the time I only do it when I know I can actually survive, and, you know, I wouldn't do it the one run when I have Banefire kind of thing. But Knight, I can imagine, you can go in there and it's going to help you tank a bit better. So that's it for the tank dragons. Let's have a look at how these tank dragons fit into the table of overall tanking. You can probably guess they're not particularly high, other than Enflare. Enflare is top of the leaderboard, and that is because it gets that permanent 60% damage reduction. That is amazingly good for just really reliable tanking, and if you use cupcakes, it's going to survive like crazy. It also stuns enemies. The one thing I will say that is a negative about it is, while that charging around is good for it avoiding some damage, it's a little annoying if you want it to be in the way the whole time. So you have to be aware of where it is the whole time, because if it starts charging around and some enemies come over and attack you, it's not getting in the way anymore. So that's kind of annoying, but you can work around it, you can pay attention to it, and most of the time it will be charging around in the same kind of group of enemies. So it's not too bad. So Enflare is arguably the best tank in the game, and the fact that it's fully consistent with this damage reduction is better too. I really like that about it. It's like a constant, you know, having this total health, whereas like Golden Scourge it's some of the time it has the damage reduction buff. It's like basically half the time, and then half the time it doesn't. Lynx has the Achilles heel of getting knocked back and stuff. So yeah, anyway, Enflare up at the top, and then the other two, as you can imagine, they're down at the bottom. They don't have any actual damage reduction or healing that works on themselves. So they are just above Ignis simply because they have a little bit more health, and that does mean they are better than the support and attacker dragons. So now we've gone through all the tank dragons, I think it makes sense to talk through this table a little bit more, because we've had a look at them all, we know how they all work, and I can point out some of the good ones. So we've talked about Enflare and Golden Scourge. These are the best, kind of big health pool. Golden Scourge, damage reduction effect. Enflare has the permanent damage reduction effect, so great with cupcakes, these two. Then we've got Lynx, which is the best healing one. Talked about that as well. Winterclaw, not too far behind Golden Scourge and Enflare. Numbers-wise, yeah, okay, fine. But also it deals really good damage at the same time, and it stuns enemies and that kind of stuff. So these four are really above the rest. They're very, very good. Then we've got the next kind of set of four, which these guys, they have some damage reduction about half the time, roughly, or, you know, around there anyway. Flame Wing heals itself, so that can solo very nicely. These four, they're really solid tank dragons. They do the job very nicely. And then next we have Aurelian. Now Aurelian we haven't looked at because we haven't looked at the support dragons yet. But this is a dragon that has reasonable health because it is a support dragon, and it gives itself a damage reduction buff. So it does have a bit more than you would expect on a support dragon. The important thing here is it has a huge heal over time, which also works on the rest of the party too. So Aurelian keeps itself alive very nicely while doing good damage. It's surprisingly high in this table. You know, it's right in the middle. It's behind the good tanks, but it's ahead of like the kind of standard tanks, and far ahead of other support dragons and that kind of thing. Then you've got some of the tank dragons at the back. Zulong's in here mainly because it creates minions. So having a support dragon's health only half what a tank dragon is, plus then regularly putting minions in the way is good for that. It was a bit hard to place this one exactly, but I think it's roughly around about there. And then these are attacker dragons, all of them apart from Ice Song, which we've talked about these in the attacker video, but we didn't talk about their tanking capability so much other than when we're looking at the dragons. So these are sadly not as good as any of the tank dragons. I think the fact that they've got a quarter health just means it's so hard for them to really compete with tank dragons. But of them, Nova, I would say, is the best tank dragon. It's a little sporadic with its buffs. It's like one buff does this healing, and one buff does one skill does the damage, and it doesn't really, you know, it flicks between the two. There's a few seconds on each. It doesn't consistently go and do the heal, but the heal effect is so strong, and it does like pushing enemies around and that kind of stuff, which helps it avoid some of the damage, and it's attacking from range as well with that stuff. So anyway, Nova survives very well. It's the best attacker dragon for surviving. Zeno has a very consistent heal, I believe. Or no, the heal is from the close range bite move, but even so, Zeno has nice healing, and it increases its it has damage reduction a bit as well, so that's good. And then we've got Fracture and Darkheart, which I put behind Zeno. I think mainly because the health pool, because of the damage reduction that Zeno gets. It means that Fracture and Darkheart are a little bit behind, I'd say. They don't heal super regularly either. It's every 25 seconds rather than 15 seconds, but the heal is good. It's a good solid heal, and they control enemies, so they survive surprisingly well. I mean, the reason why these 4 attacker dragons are on this list, even though they're at the bottom, is they survive so much better than the other attacker dragons. I think they're they deserve being on this list far more than other things. Even more so than support dragons. You'll notice there was literally just Aurelion here, Zulong here, Aisong here. Like, these attacker dragons tank better than almost all the support dragons. So that is definitely something that's worth noting. And then finally we have Aisong here, which we're going to look at in the next video. It's got quite a small amount of health. However, it's doubled. That's why it's actually, I say small, it's being doubled. Oh no, not doubled, just increased a bit. Anyway, it does a 50% damage reduction for the party, and that's really, really, really good. So Aisong just about makes it onto this table. So that's all the best tanking dragons in the order which I would say they are there. In terms of reading this, you probably picked up from me saying things. Star is it's increased by the average damage reduction. S means that the dragon stuns enemies or disrupts them, so it kind of helps stop the enemies from attacking them. And then M means that they make minions which get in the way. And that's pretty much explaining this, and then the consistency of the healing or damage reduction, that kind of thing. That's what we're going through here. So I hope that's given you all the information you could ever want to know about the tanking. Tanks in I was going to say Neo Monsters. God, that's bad. people on my Kings Road videos, 1 minute my Neo Monsters videos, they're like, when are you going to make videos about Kings Road again? And I'm like, I do make videos about Kings Road. It's not just Neo Monsters. And then I want to close off this video by talking about Neo Monsters. Oh dear, sorry about that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be going with the support dragons next, so look forward to that. I'll see you then.